Hello, and welcome to another episode of All the Mods 9. Let's see, last episode, we started up some LuV stuff, made ourselves an assembly line, an alloy blast smelter, a little scanner, and I didn't really go over the data access hatch, but this is where you put your data sticks or data orbs, and that's how you tell the assembly line, this is how you construct certain items. Some items it has built in, like these LuV components. And I think the majority of last episode I just went over patch notes. Uh, and I failed to mention a few things. Like when it came to research, there is a second tier beyond the scanner. The High Performance Computation Array, or HPCA. This is how you provide computation. It's called CWU, or Computation Work Units. And you'll see these things, they say it provides a certain amount of computation, requires a certain amount of cooling, and it can be damaged by overheating. So if you aren't providing it the cooling that it needs, it will overheat and can break. This is the little panel where you would put, or maybe it's this side is where you would put your HPCA components. There's advanced computation components, regular computation components, active cooling, passive cooling. Active cooling uses PCB coolant, which isn't terribly difficult to make. It's just in a mixer at HV, some polychlorinated biphenyl, which is biphenyl dust with chlorine. Biphenyl dust is nothing more than benzene and oxygen, or benzene and toluene. That's how you get your computation work units. I think the best you can get out of one of those is like 48 computation work units. You use them with the research station. So you see the research station requires a minimum amount of computation to actually research, in this case, the ZPM dynamo hatch. It requires 8 CWU, or computation work units. But as it goes higher in tier, like ZPM, to research the UV energy hatch in a data module, you need 64. What you can do is you can actually, this is the wrong one. There we go. You can use the bridge component and a network switch where you would have your HPCAs all feed into one network switch. You'd have multiple of them, all providing an amount of computation work units. And then you'd have one output, and that output would go to your research station, and it would combine your HPCAs together. The data bank comes into play for specifically this data access hatch. Since it only has 9 slots, there is an advanced version which has 16 slots, but the data bank essentially lets you have multiple of these data hatches. You can also chain data banks together. You can have one data bank with multiple hatches feed into another data bank with multiple hatches, and then output that data bank info via optical pipe into an assembly line. If we look at the assembly line, this could be a data access hatch, or it could be an optical data reception hatch from the data bank. Pretty cool stuff. We'll definitely get into it when we get there. Right now, we're still just at the lowly scanner stage with our data sticks. Another thing I failed to mention, we made a greenhouse. It's not particularly impressive to look at. You know, it takes dirt, some kind of sapling, some kind of light. And all this thing does is it essentially runs recipes that can be done in a botany pot. You'll also see things like mystical agriculture included in here. So if I wanted to make fiery ingot essence, I could grow it in a botany pot. I could use a phytogenic insulator. I could use seed reprocessing. I could use a garden cloche. I can also use the greenhouse, and you'll notice there are two recipes for it. One where you like boost the speed so the duration is down. You boost it by giving it the appropriate tier essence, and you also boost the output that it gives. The greenhouse is also pretty nice because it has that parallel control hatch ability, and it's just a bunch of MV circuits. It's pretty straightforward to craft. By default, it is the same speed that botany pots are at until you get to mystical agriculture. Mystical agriculture, it's set up so that the duration scales with the tier of the seed. And you can boost them, make them fast. Or faster. One thing that you can also do with it, that you cannot do in a botany pot, is grow rubber from GregTech. You'll see it grows a lot of rubber, and some sticky resin and rubber saplings. And you can boost that with fertilizer from GregTech. There's a lot of ways to make fertilizer. We won't go over those. Oh, and one last thing I failed to mention was the turtle egg. You can now craft this stuff with mystical agriculture, just like you would craft a regular egg with chicken essence. You can use turtle essence to make a turtle egg. I don't know why you would. I think mainly for apotheosis. Yeah, to make a spawner youthful. Additionally, now drigmees and wannabes should be able to get turtle eggs from turtles and chicken eggs from chickens. I think I failed to mention that last time. Anyway, that's enough patch notes. I'm not going to keep going into it forever, at least not this time. This episode, I've bookmarked a lot of things here. The large cutting saw, the large extrusion machine, the large material press, the large wire factory, an LuV mixer, the large mixing vessel, the large engraving laser, our energy converter for when we get to LuV. These are my goals. I need to make an LuV assembler. I didn't bookmark the large assembling factory, mainly because if we look at its energy hatch, it can only take one energy hatch, and right now the only energy hatch I can make is IV, so I could make a large IV assembling factory. I could not make an LuV or this ludicrous voltage coil because it requires LuV to make it. So I have to make the single block. The mixing vessel should accept two energy hatches. So I can give this one two IV energy hatches and overclock it to LuV. So I do not need the LuV mixer. I can just make a large mixing vessel. But those are my goals for this episode, to make a bunch of multi-blocks. And I think I'll start with the large engraving laser, possibly the large cutting saw, and put them both in here so that we can uh, perhaps cut things faster, laser engrave things faster, reduce these machines hopefully down to one. We will see. I might have to make two. But I'll make the components and I'll bring you guys back in once I've gotten the machine built, but I haven't set it up yet. So I'll bring you along for setup. Be back in a jiff. Just like that, we went ahead and built this thing. I was able to fit 11 input buses as well as an output bus on here. I think, though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this output, or this input bus, replace it with just an output bus. So instead, I'll have 10 input buses and one output bus, so that in the future, I could put a parallel control hatch on there. I won't put a parallel control hatch on just yet, but in the future, I probably will. I also dragged over some cabling. And this should be pretty easy for us. All we have to do is slap down some pattern providers on every single input bus. We're going to want an interface on the output bus to accept items back in. We need to set every input bus to distinct mode. That way they cannot interfere with each other. Ingredients in this input bus won't take ingredients out of another. Each input will be treated separately. And I need to actually wire things up. You're just putting down some cable anchors. That should give us all of our channels. Yeah, all 11 channels. Now we need to actually bring our patterns over. So I'll start with brown. This might take a second. Yeah. But it's really straightforward. Yeah, one extra, it looks like. Unless I missed one. I did miss one. We have none left over. So this is now a fully completed large engraving laser at LuV. So if I order a bunch of circuits, let's say, yeah, let's go ahead and make the LuV circuit. Say I want 4. Looks like it has to craft at least one memory wafer. Some RAM wafers for us. So we should get to see this thing in action. Because it's LuV, it is significantly faster. Now we're just waiting on the cutter. Might actually be outside, but that's okay. It looks like I can now remove all of our laser engravers that are here, get rid of these pattern providers, reclaim the channels that are taken up in this. The only downside is I do use one extra channel for the interface here. And this one does not have distinct buses. I want all the outputs to come out into this output bus to go into this interface, to go back into my system. Didn't realize I had all these machines still making sound. But yeah, that's large engraving laser off of our list. I did manage to make a new tier of cable. Vanadium gallium is something we already had. I just turned that into cable for us. That'll carry us through LuV and ZPM. And I can use it now at IV. And I made some of these LuV 16 amp energy converters. Looks like next up is the cutting saw. Shouldn't be too terribly difficult. It's a little bit big, and I'm just checking that I can actually put it in the clean room, making sure of it. If it had a muffler hatch, it would be too dirty for the clean room. So for example, I think the mixing vessel, no, the mixing vessel does not have a muffler hatch. Something does. I'm sure of it. But in that instance, I wouldn't put one of those in here. I may make a large chemical reactor as well to replace this chemical reactor. And then it'll just be circuit assembler that lives in here, the single block, as opposed to all of these single blocks. Oh, and a regular assembler. I had to make this to make the data access hatch because it requires a clean room at EV. So yeah, I'm going to replace the cutters with a large cutting machine or large cutting saw. I did not set any of these to blocking mode or lock crafting since they only hold one pattern. And I suspect I won't set it to blocking mode for the cutter, but I will have to do something special for the chemical reactor when we get there. be back in a jiff once I've cleaned up this room a little bit, gotten rid of some of these laser engravers, and made a cutting saw for us. And there we are. We've got ourselves a large cutting saw. You, by default, it's in cutter mode, but you could change the active machine mode to lathe. We want it in cutter mode because I moved all of our cutter recipes into here. And I'm just using the subnet, pattern provider interface trick to go into input bus and input hatch for us. And then another interface on the output bus with the storage bus on our pattern provider. And while I was at it, I did build the large chemical reactor. This thing, well, both of them, I set to lock crafting until the primary crafting result is returned. And I wanted to make my large chemical reactor essentially ready for whatever I ask it for. So this doesn't have any circuit setting set, but you can generalize a chemical reactor fairly easily. All you need are 3 input hatches. So we have 3 input hatches, 1 input bus, and 3 output hatches, and 1 output bus. And that is altogether a chemical reactor that should be able to handle any chemical reactor recipe. The only thing it wouldn't be able to handle are like different circuit settings. But currently we don't have any special circuit settings for these. Let's test these things, put them into action. Let's make some nano CPU chips. That'll use both. Very nice. Looks like we set things up just fine. And I didn't put the parallel control hatch in the cutting saw either. Uh, the parallel control hatch might be something I start adding into machines once we get to recipes taking only like 1 tick to complete. Oh, and I looked at in IV, the Large Chemical Reactor quest, tells you how you can generalize this thing. Just as a reference. All right. So we're currently at 21 out of 32 channels, but we aren't using 6 of those because the only 2 patterns are the circuit assembler and the assembler in here. Everything else we've removed. We removed the recipes for the chemical reactor. We removed the recipes for the cutter. I'm pretty happy with that. Large engraving laser, large cutting saw, completed. Next up for us is the large mixing vessel. This guy. And all of these generally require an IV version of the machine. So I've requested a bunch of IV tier circuits so we can make those machines. Oh, that's not great. The large mixing vessel requires osmiridium rotors. Osmiridium requires the LuV mixer. So I was wrong. I do need an LuV mixer in addition to the LuV assembler. Darn. Okay, well, I'm going to make that. back in a once I've gotten the LuV mixer made, I'll make the LuV assembler too. I think I will aim to have these LuV energy hatches for the next couple of machines I make so I can overclock them straight away to ZPM rather than all of these are at LuV now. So I'll stop putting it off. I'll see you shortly. Welcome back. So now we have ourselves an LuV mixer and an LuV assembler. I put these in the clean room despite their recipes not being clean room recipes. They're both program 1 recipes. And I just gave them a little energy converter and used that vanadium gallium cable we have. It doesn't matter if they're not clean room recipes, they'll still work in a clean room. And it doesn't need to be clean even, they'll still work. And I went ahead and programmed in the recipes for pretty much everything here. So let's go ahead and start ordering things. I'm going to save the energy hatch for last. And instead, let's look at our new quantum circuits. So I can't upgrade this recipe yet. We'll need an LuV circuit assembler to do that. But I can get rid of these old recipes. They'll no longer help us. But yeah, we're going to have access to ZPM tier circuits now. Let's go ahead and craft some. We've got a lot of cutting and chemical reacting to do. As we're making qubits, oh, I forgot I need to actually make these as well and hold them. I also need to hold these epoxy resin sheets. It's fiber reinforced. I think I may have forgot to tell it to make this one. But yeah, once we have these last components, this IV and this ZPM circuit, well, I'll need to go through and update all of my recipes that rely on circuits again. Make sure that they're correct using the right circuit. I think all that's left for us to do is make some energy hatches. we'll start with 1. And if I did research correctly, I have the data stick already in here. It should just start crafting it for us once we have wafers and some osmiridium going. I'll have to update this recipe as well to use the correct LuV circuit, but that's okay. I'll do that when we run out of the previous tier. Something I've noticed is I'm starting to have a little backlog of these old circuits. So I'll update the recipes when I run out of them and it starts saying I can't make these components anymore. Hey, looks like we'll have it any second now. This is the first real test of research. There we go. It looks like it all works. Now, much of this chapter is not completed, but we have finished the LuV chapter. I guess we could make a start now on ZPM, but I think we would be doing ourselves a bit of a disservice doing that because we wouldn't have the infrastructure set up. So I am going to go ahead and continue with making these multi-block machines. But before we do that, let's order more of these LuV energy hatches. Let's order a lot of them. Let's have 48 on hand. That's going to take a long time to craft for us. While that's working, I can go ahead and accept some quest rewards, though, since I forgot to do that before. I hope it's not been driving anyone insane. It's a lot of XP. These are pretty good rewards, though. Like getting an LuV robot arm is huge. That's a significant craft. While I'm in here, might as well accept some of the other rewards. Force of habit. Every check mark I see, I click. Just so I don't have to worry about check marks gating my progression later. Oh, no double reward this time. Previously, it's been like if you get the MV reward at the end of LV, you also get another reward. Looks like they wizened up. So now we just get some XP. I won't keep the add-on tier 1 or the wind generator. Goodness, what do I still have to accept? Oh, a book. Or if I can put that in the eccentric tome. I love that these can be worn on your head. I have to do something with this. This is a Zephyr Wind Spirit's head, a member of the All the Mods team. Let's have Zephyr watch over our clean room for us, as well as some of the mechanism stuff. We've completed LuV. Yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about this. Um, I won't make the 4 amp energy hatch. Just because it lets you overclock the speed of running recipes, but not recipe tier. And I'd rather it I'd rather just overclock recipe tier in addition to speed. This is going to take a minute to craft. I might also batch craft some samarium for us, as well as some osmiridium. That could be very useful. And I suspect it will take a very long time. And you can see I've been slowly batch crafting some high-speed steel as well. I think I also made the other variants, some graphene dust. So, been a little busy making these things. Yeah, I think our next plan of attack is going to be making a large mixing vessel. Going to want to take the machines that are attached to my blast furnaces. It's like this wire mill, this bender, the centrifuge and electrolyzer I have right here. Going to want to move those so that they're no longer tied to the voltage of the blast furnace. I'll either want to move them or just make the multi-block variants Same with this, the macerator, compressor, and fluid solidifier over here. I may just make the multi-block variants of these machines so I can take them away from the blast furnaces, just so I don't have to upgrade these single blocks, so I can keep upgrading energy hatches instead. But yeah, I'm going to come up with a little bit of a plan. Maybe start working on this mixing vessel. Large extrusion machine would be really nice. We'll see where we get. I'll check back in with you in a second. And we're back. Hope you didn't miss me too much. Uh, I've done a little bit. So I just set up, just like we have right here, for neodymium to make rare earth for us. I set up a couple of lines for uh, naquita and stibnite. Reason I did naquita and stibnite, well, naquita, we need a lot of naquita going forward. I made both of the bees. Might be easier to actually look at their spawn egg recipes. You just need a couple blocks of naquita, some osmium bee spawn eggs, the high speed steel G coils, and it takes no time at all to make the naquita bee spawn egg. Stibnite, I think, is, yeah, just electrolyzing cinnabar. So why did I get these two bees? Well, stibnite produces stibnite combs, which gives you raw stibnite. Raw stibnite is really handy for antimony trioxide. You'll also notice its chemical composition is antimony sulfur, 2 antimony, 3 sulfur. And if I did sodium persulfate, I could get cinnabar, but I want the antimony trioxide, and I want antimony. What do I need antimony for? Well, antimony I can turn into antimony trifluoride. Antimony trifluoride I can then react with hydrofluoric acid to make fluoroantimonic acid. And fluoroantimonic acid is exactly what you react naquita with to get naquadria solution and enriched naquita solution, both impure, as well as titanium trifluoride. The titanium trifluoride is an important byproduct because it gives you back hydrofluoric acid for some hydrogen. The impure solutions you can then centrifuge to get the purified solution, as well as this trinium sulfide and some antimony trifluoride back. Trinium sulfide you can then turn into trinium. Trinium is used a lot going forward. It's one of the key ingredients. One thing we need it for is making naquita alloy dust. So we need trinium, osmiridium, and naquita to make naquita alloy. And this naquita alloy is the primary crafting component for ZPM. It takes 8 plates. And recall it's 1 ingot to 1 plate. So this is quite an involved process just for ZPM. So we process stibnite and we process naquita. One of the byproducts of naquita is enriched naquita, which comes in handy, as we'll see later on. But I wanted to set these up and get them going as soon as I could. got the B for them and everything. And I didn't replace these machines. I moved the scanner over here. I just disconnected the energy converter and connected up a new IV one so that I could have LuV hatches on my blast furnace and IV machines. That's not good. Huh. I guess applied flux gives me the ability to put forge energy into here. If I just break and replace it, this should empty its inventory of forge energy. I did something similar over here. I just separated these lines and put in a new IV converter so that I wouldn't have to get rid of these machines. And I could still have this guy running at ZPM now. Although, looking at this pattern provider, it's starting to fill up quite a bit. I think I'm going to make a new electric blast furnace once these Naquita coil blocks finish crafting. All you need is osmium, Naquita wire, and some tungsten steel in liquid form in an LuV assembler, which we have. And I did go ahead and set up some multi-blocks. So we've got the large wire factory, and I just put the flat version of pattern providers as well as an interface on the output, just so I could accept the output. These flat pattern providers, I made them flat so that I could interact with the block with the input bus and make sure I had distinct buses set and the circuit setting set correctly for each one of these. I haven't bothered to turn blocking mode back on for any of them. Uh, oh, I did set up the large material press. You'll notice there's this change active machine mode tab or button, which will let you change whether or not it's a bender, a compressor, a forge hammer, or a forming press. I just have it in bender mode. This guy is my large extrusion machine. And I went through, I grabbed all of my molds, and I grabbed all the patterns for those molds. And I set this all up. We're using 21 channels total. These guys just have low voltage input buses. I still didn't set blocking mode. Hopefully it's okay. It'll probably be fine for these machines. The one I did special here is the mixer. So the mixer, I just have 3 different input buses on programs 1, 2, and 3, or 2, 1, and 3. And I set up one pattern provider here where I use the lock crafting mechanism because it's producing me the mercury, barium, calcium cuprate. It produces liquid concrete and indium tin, barium, titanium cuprate. These things have liquid as well as dust ingredients. So as I'm sure you're fully aware of by now, I just put an interface on there and some storage buses. And that's how I get the inputs to go into the right spot So there's one more input bus here on program 4, 2 input hatches. Then on the other side, I have a storage bus on the pattern provider and 2 interfaces going into an output bus and an output hatch. So this guy's set to lock crafting until it receives the output from what it feeds into here. It'll also receive the outputs from whatever these guys make. And that'll be fine. Went ahead and upgraded some things to LuV. So now our assembly line is at a ZPM recipe tier. This vacuum freezer is at ZPM. And this alloy blast melter is also at ZPM. So I've managed to make the large material press, the large wire factory, a stibnite bee, a naquita bee, a mixing vessel and extrusion, components. Only thing I'm waiting on now are some coil blocks. But once we have the coil blocks, I still need to do the rest of this line here. Turn the trioxide into trifluoride into fluoroantimonic acid to then get to react with my naquita to get the enriched solution. Then I need to centrifuge it to get tritium. I guess I have to make the LuV machine for the quest. I may also just make the multiblock. And then we can start making tritium. I'm not sure why the quest had me make this large fluid pipe, considering it's a component for a UV electric pump, but it didn't hurt to make. But I want to start gearing up for fusion. The fusion reactor computer Mark 1. So it does require research. It requires the indium, tin, barium, titanium, cuprate wire. As well as IV field generators, which don't look too bad. Some double plates. This ultra high power integrated chip. So we need to chemical react with liquid naquita and the indium gallium phosphide at LuV in a clean room. But thankfully, I forgot to upgrade these machines. But I can upgrade these machines to ZPM tier. And that'll be very easy for us. I think I may call the episode here. So we've got some upgrades to make. Fairly simple. Some research to do. Start working towards a fusion reactor Mark 1. So we can get this europium. We'll also start working towards tritium. So we can make ZPM tier machines. And we'll start trying to get ourselves these components, these fusion components. And maybe we can work a little bit towards the crystal tier processors. I really want to get into the high performance computation array, but I don't know when that comes up. I suppose we will find out. As always, though, if you managed to watch through to the end, thank you for joining. Thanks for watching. Hope you had a lovely time, and I hope the rest of your day is just as good. Bye bye.